Just answer one question. What they're saying about Martinez. Is it true? Gabe doesn't respond. Gabe, did Martinez go with those assholes from the other camp? She turns to Bruce. Did he? Bruce looks down and lets out a pained sigh. He nods. The motherfucker helped them escape. And we know this how. Bruce looked at her. We got eyewitnesses. Saw that cocksucker helping them over the wall at the end of the Duran Street alley. What eyewitnesses? Bruce shrugs. The lady with the sick kid, what's the name? And also Curtis, the kid gone in the alley that night. Said Martinez relieved him, but the kid hung around and saw them going over saw the black chick splitting off from the group. Bitch jumped the governor minutes later. Where? In the governor's place. Around his fucking home. The fucking bitch bushwhacked him. Okay. Let's just stick to the facts for a second. Lily starts to nervously pace the room, every few moments throwing a glance at the patient. The governor's face looks swollen and misshapen under his bandages, the gauze bulging where his left eye socket should be. How do we know these douchebags didn't have a gun on Martinez the whole time? Bruce shoots a look at Gabe, who stares at Lily skeptically and says, I wouldn't bet on it, Lily. Why? Gabe glares at her. Well, let's see. How about the fact that Martinez is a lying son of a bitch with no loyalty to the governor? Why do you say that? Gabe snorts disdainfully, almost laughs. Let me think. He points to an oblong bruise spanning his Adam's apple. For starters, he waylaid me outside the chick's holding cell, pretty near cracked my skull open. He glares at Lily. On top of that, wasn't he part of your little hole-in-the-wall gang last year when you tried to take out the governor? Lily meets his gaze, doesn't even flinch, just stares at him and says, Things change. We made some bad choices. She looks at Bruce, then back at Gabe. I don't know about Martinez, but I'm with the governor 100% now. 1,000%. Neither man says anything. Both just stare at the floor like children in detention. Lily gazes at the patient. I guess it comes as no surprise that Stevens and Alice went along with the strangers. There was never any love lost there. Gabe lets out another snort. That's a fucking understatement. Lily paces, thinking. I think that's what bothers me the most. Bruce speaks up. What do you mean? Because we ain't got a doc now? Lily looks at him. No. That's not what I'm talking about. She gestures toward Bob. I think we're covered in that department. She glances back at Bruce. What I'm worried about is the fact that these assholes have people from our town with them. Bruce and Gabe exchange another heated glance. Gabe looks at Lily. So what? So what? She walks over to the gurney and looks down at the governor. The man clings to life, one lidded eye visible through an opening in the head dressing, the eyeball shifting slightly under the lid. Is he dreaming? Is he brain damaged? Is he ever going to fight his way out of this vegetative state? Lily stares at the slow rise and fall of the man's chest and thinks some more. Martinez, Alice, and the doctor know this town better than anyone, she murmurs, not taking her gaze off the patient. They know the weak spots. They know where we're vulnerable. This sends a paralyzing silence through the reeking tile chamber. Everybody stares at Lily as though waiting for her to provide an answer. She stares at the governor's ravaged body for another moment. At last, she turns to Bob and says with a newfound air of authority, Bob, give me a prognosis here. The first 24 hours had been anybody's guess. Once they brought the governor's decimated body back to the infirmary, the main issue was keeping his heart beating, followed closely by stanching the blood loss. Despite the fact that he had a crudely cauterized stump halfway up his arm at the point of dismemberment, slowing the bleeding from the amputation, which was mercifully clean thanks to the sharpness of the katana sword, there had been massive bleeding at other wound sites, especially the detached penis. Bob had done a lot of hasty battlefield stitching with the storehouse of dissolving catgut Doc Stevens kept on the shelf, reattaching the severed penis at one point with shaking hands. When he ran out of sutures, he used a needle and thread procured from the general store on Main Street. The old lessons from the war zone came back to him in waves. He remembered the 4 stages of hypovolemic shock. Battlefield medics call it the tennis match, since the stages of blood loss mimic tennis scores. 15% loss is minor, 15 to 30% is serious, resulting in plummeting blood pressure and tachycardia. 30 to 40% is life-threatening, bringing on cardiac arrest, and 40% plus is deadly. For hours, the governor wavered in between stage 2 and 3, and Bob had to resort to CPR twice to keep the man's heart beating. Luckily, Stevens kept enough electrolytes in the storeroom to maintain the IV drip, and Bob even found half a dozen units of whole blood. He couldn't figure out how to type the governor, that was beyond Bob's skill set, but he did know enough to get plasma into the man as soon as possible. The transfusions weren't rejected, and after 6 hours, the governor had stabilized somewhat. Bob even found an old oxygen tank that was half full, and administered it in dribs and drabs until the governor seemed to be holding his own. His breathing steadied and his sinus rhythm returned to normal. He settled into a semi-comatose state. Later, in the fashion of an insurance investigator piecing together the chronology of a fatal accident, Bob Stuckey had drawn crude sketches in a spiral-bound notebook of the instruments of torture left in the governor's living room, as well as the assumed points of entry. The puncture wound from the drill was especially problematic, in spite of the fact that it had apparently not severed any major arteries. It had come within 2 centimeters of a branching vein of the carotid, and Bob had worked for nearly an hour cleaning out the site. He ran out of gauze, ran out of tape, ran out of hydrogen peroxide, ran out of betadine, and ran out of glucose. Another issue was internal bleeding, the treatment of which was, again, just out of Bob's reach. But by the 2nd day, Bob was convinced that the assault on the governor's rectum, as well as the profusion of blunt instrument trauma to 75% of his body, had not resulted in any internal hemorrhaging. Once the man was stabilized, Bob turned his attention to infection. He knew from frontline experience that infection is the silent partner in most battlefield fatalities, the #1 tool of the Grim Reaper once a soldier is out of immediate danger. So he rifled through the supplies and ransacked the infirmary cupboards looking for antibiotics. He worried that the governor was a perfect candidate for sepsis, considering all the rusty, filthy, oxidized tools used on him. So Bob used up every last cc of moxifloxacin in the IV and administered hypodermically the last drops of netromycin left in Woodbury. By the morning of the 3rd day, the wounds had begun to close over and heal.
"I wouldn't say he's out of the woods yet,"
Bob now reports, summing up the whole situation as he walks across the infirmary to the trash bin, into which he tosses a wad of used cotton swabs. It's taken him nearly 10 minutes to recap the whole timeline, and now he goes over to the coffee urn and pours himself another few fingers of the muddy stuff.
"Put it this way. He's on the edge of the woods, holding steady."
He turns to Lily and holds up the coffee cup.
"You want a cup of joe?"
Lily shrugs.
"Sure, why not?"
She turns to Bruce and Gabe, who stand fidgeting by the door. "I'm not telling you guys what to do, but if it were me, I would go check the wall on the north end."
"What are you, the Queen of Sheba now?"
Bruce grumbles. "With Martinez gone and the governor out of commission, those guys have been deserting their posts left and right. We can't afford to be careless right now." Bruce and Gabe look at each other, each one gauging the other's reaction to being bossed around by some chick from the suburbs. "She's got a point," Gabe says.
"Jesus Christ, whatever."
Bruce grouses under his breath, then turns and storms out the door. Gabe follows him out. Bob comes over to Lily and hands her a paper cup of coffee. Lily notices again how Bob's hands have stopped shaking. She takes a sip. "Holy crap, this is bad," she says with a slight cringe.
"It's wet and it's got caffeine in it,"
Bob comments as he turns back to his patient. Pulling the spiral-bound notebook from his back pocket, he nudges a chair next to the gurney, sits down, and makes a few notes.
"We're at a critical stage now,"
he murmurs while he writes.
"Got to keep track of how much Vicodin I've given him. Not sure if all the drugs have ganged up on him. Maybe induced the coma he's in."
Lily edges her chair closer to the gurney and sits next to the foot of the bed. She can smell the cloying odors of antiseptic and iodine. She stares at the governor's untrimmed toenails and pale bare feet, as limp and pallid as dead fish, poking out from under the sheet. For a moment, Lily is stricken with a strange mixture of impressions, crucifixion and sacrificial lambs, which jolts through her with the strength of a lightning bolt. The unexpected emotion tightens her gut and makes her turn away. What kind of person could do this to another person? Who is this lady? Where the hell did she come from? And the deeper concerns banging around the back of Lily's mind. If this woman is capable of doing this to a man as dangerous as the governor, then what is her group capable of doing to Woodbury?
"The key now is keeping infection away from the door,"
Bob is saying, gently palpating the governor's neck with a fingertip, keeping track of the man's pulse. "Bob, tell me the truth," Lily says, looking into the older man's eyes. Bob's face furrows with bemusement as he meets Lily's stare. He puts down his notebook. She speaks softly. "Do you think he's gonna make it?" Bob takes in a deep, thoughtful breath, and then exhales with a sigh.
"He's a tough cuss, this one."
He looks at the governor's shrouded face.
"If anybody can pull through something like this, he can."
Lily notices Bob's gnarled left hand is resting gently on the governor's shoulder. The unexpected tenderness takes her aback for a moment. She wonders if Bob Stuckey has finally found his raison d'etre, a channel for all his grief and unrequited love. She wonders if this whole crisis has given Bob a way to stave off the pain of losing Megan. She wonders if this is what Bob always needed, a surrogate son, someone who needed him. The governor has always been kind to Bob. Lily noticed that almost from day one. And now she sees the logical extension of that kindness. Bob has never looked more alive, more at peace, more comfortable in his own skin. "How long, though?" Lily says at last. "How long do you think he's going to be laid up?" Bob shakes his head with a sigh.
"There's no telling how long. Even if I was some highfalutin trauma surgeon, I wouldn't be able to give you a timetable."
Lily sighs. "We're in some deep shit here, Bob. We need fucking leadership more than ever. We could be attacked at any minute." She swallows hard, feeling a twinge of nausea ripple up her gorge. "Not now, goddammit, not now," she thinks. "With the governor out of action, we are screwed. We need to batten down the fucking hatches." Bob shrugs.
"All I can do is stay with him, keep watch, and hope for the best."
Lily chews her lip. "What do you think went down between the two of them?"
"Who?"
"The governor and that girl." Another shrug from Bob.
"I don't know anything about that."
He thinks about it for a moment.
"It doesn't matter. Whoever did this to him was a nutcase, an animal, and they ought to be put down like a goddamn rabid dog."
Lily shakes her head. "I know he had her locked up. He was probably questioning her. Did Bruce or Gabe say anything about it?"
"I didn't ask, and I don't want to know."
Bob rubs his eyes.
"All I want is to get him out of these weeds, get him back on his feet, no matter how long it takes."
Lily lets out another sigh. "I don't know what we're going to do without him, Bob. We need somebody keeping these people on their toes. Bob thinks about it some more, and then gives her a wry little smile.
I think you might have already found that person.
She looks at him. All at once she realizes what he's getting at, and the pressure lands on her like a giant anvil, nearly taking her breath away. No fucking way. Not in a million fucking years is it gonna be me. That night, Lily organizes an emergency meeting in the courthouse, in the community room in the rear. The doors locked down and all the lights off except for a pair of kerosene lanterns flickering on the conference table. She asks each person in attendance to keep the meeting a secret. The 5 of them arrive after midnight, after the town has quieted down, and they each take a seat at the table, with Lily sitting at the head, near the broken-down metal stand bearing the faded, threadbare Georgia state flag. For Lily, the room teems with ghosts. Phantoms from her past ooze from the crumbling plaster walls, from the litter-strewn floor, from the overturned folding chairs, from the bullet holes in the front wall and from the high windows which are all cracked and boarded up now. A framed portrait of Nathan Deal, the long-forgotten 82nd governor of Georgia, dangles on the lintel, the glass shattered and stained with the rusty blood droplets in the dancing firelight. A fitting testament to the apocalypse. The memories wash over Lily that night. She remembers meeting Philip Blake in this room over a year and a half ago, when she first arrived in Woodbury with Josh, Megan, Bob, and Scott the Stoner. And Lily will never forget the swagger, the creepy impression the governor initially gave off. Little did she know he would become her lifeline one day. He would be her anchor in this sea of chaos. Christ on a cracker, Barbara Stern utters after hearing the whole story of the elaborate escape and the condition of the governor. She sits next to her husband on one side of the table, wringing her slender hands. The gloomy light flickers off her deeply lined face and tendrils of iron-gray hair.
As if we don't have enough on our plates in this god-forsaken place. We have to deal with this now?
I think the first thing we have to do is put out a cover story, Lily says. She wears an Atlanta Braves cap with her hair in a ponytail poking through the plastic band and back. All business now. The crisis has driven her morning sickness away. Bruce, sitting at the opposite end of the table, leaning back skeptically in his chair, his lean, cabled arms crossed against his chest, gives her a frown. A what? She looks at him. A cover story. Some bullshit explanation that won't get everybody all excited and stressed out. She looks around the table. We should keep it simple. Make sure all our stories match up. Lily, Austin speaks up from the chair to her immediate left. He has his hands clasped as if praying, and he holds a pained look on his face. You do realize people are going to find out sooner or later. I mean, this is a really small town. Lily lets out a nervous sigh. Okay, well, if they find out, let's make sure it stays a rumor. People have been saying all kinds of crazy shit. David Stern pipes in. Honey, just out of curiosity, what is it you're worried about happening if we just tell everybody the truth? Lily exhales, pushes herself away from the head of the table, and starts pacing. Look, we have to keep this town buttoned up tight. We can't have people panicking right now. We really have no idea who these strangers are or what they have in mind. She clenches her fists. You want to see what they're capable of? Go to the infirmary and take a look at the governor. These people are nuts. They're dangerous as hell. We have to up our defenses. If we're going to err, we're going to err on the side of being too careful. Gabe speaks up from over by the windows. Then I say we go after them. Leaning against the boarded, arched window pane, his hands in his pockets, he glowers at Lily. Best defense is a strong offense. Fucking A, Bruce says with a nod, leaning back against the defunct Coke machine. No! Lily stands her ground near the flag. her hazel eyes blazing with righteous fervor, her delicate chin jutting defiantly. "Not without the governor. We don't make any major moves while he's out." Now she looks at every person in the room, one at a time, her voice going low and steady. "We stick to a cover story until he's on his feet again. Bob thinks it's possible he could come out of it any day." She looks at Gabe. "You understand what I'm saying? Until then, we zip this place up as tight as a drum." Gabe takes a deep breath and lets out an exasperated sigh. "Okay, Missy. We do it your way." Lily looks at Bruce. "You okay with this?" He shakes his head, rolling his eyes. "Whatever you say, girlfriend. You got the wheel. You're on a roll." "Okay, good." She looks back at Gabe. "Why don't we tell a couple of Martinez's guys to get lost for a few days, and then we'll tell everybody the governor's out on a search party with them. Can you handle that?" Gabe shrugs. "I guess so. Yeah." "In the meantime, we keep a guard on the infirmary at all times." Lily looks at the others. "So that's our cover story. We're going to need everybody in this room to step up. Bruce, you handle the wall. Keep shifts going all the time and make sure we got plenty of ammo for the machine guns. Make another run to the guard station if you have to." She looks at the Stearns. "David and Barbara, you two spread the word. Keep your ears open. That group that has coffee in the square every morning, hang out with them. Keep tabs on what they're saying. Austin, you and I'll take regular walks around the barricade. We'll make sure everything's secure. This is critical, people. With the governor on his back, we are totally vulnerable. We have to remember—" A noise outside the boarded windows cuts her off. All heads snap toward the sound of yelling, glass breaking, wood splitting apart. "Oh, shit," Lily utters, frozen at the front of the room with her fists clenched. Barbara Stern springs to her feet, her eyes suddenly wide with terror. "Maybe it's just a fight. Somebody drunk or pissed off or something." "I don't think so," David Stern murmurs, standing up and reaching around for the pistol wedged into the back of his belt. He draws his gun. Austin jumps out of his chair and darts across the room to where Lily stands staring. "Let's let Gabe and Bruce check it out first." Across the room, Bruce is already on his feet, pulling the .45 from its holster, snapping off the safety and shooting a look at Gabe. "You got the other MiG?" Gabe has already whirled toward the far corner of the room, where two assault rifles are leaning against the wall. He grabs one, and then the other, and then turns to Bruce and tosses one of the rifles as he yells, "Come on, let's go, before all hell breaks loose!" Bruce catches the weapon, chambers around, and follows Gabe out the door, down the hall, and toward the exit. The others stand frozen in the community room, looking at each other and listening to the pandemonium rising out on the street. Chapter 4. In the darkness, an empty bottle of Jack rolls across the street half a block north of the courthouse, and Gabe kicks it aside as he barrels toward the southwest corner of town, Bruce right on his heels. In the night winds, Gabe can see the intermittent muzzle flashes behind the grove of trees along the town square, sparks as bright as arc welders bouncing off the sky, the cool night air alive with screams. One of the guards is already down on the ground by the curb, his drinking buddies scattering now, their silhouettes receding into the distance. 3 walkers have piled up on the fallen guard, tearing into him, the blood tide spreading in all directions as they feed. Burrowing down into flesh, ripping strings of tendons and cartilage in the flickering shadows. Gabe gets to within 20 yards of the feeding orgy and snaps the selector lever on the rifle. His barrel comes up as he charges in and pulls the trigger. Hellfire blazes out of the MiG, strafing the top halves of the biters, punching holes through cranial bones and fountains of tissue and bursts of blood mist. The walkers fold. Bruce roars past Gabe with his own rifle up and braced on his big shoulder, his booming voice coming out in one spontaneous cry. "Get that fucking wall back up now!" Gabe glances back up and sees what Bruce is shouting about in the darkness 25 yards away. A weak spot in the corner of the barricade, a conglomeration of drywall panels, sheet metal, and roofing nails, has collapsed under the weight of a dozen or more walkers pushing in from the adjacent woods. The men must have been shirking their watch, fucking around, not paying attention, drinking or some shit. Now one of the young guards on a gun turret frantically sweeps his arc lamp down on the scene, the silver beam crisscrossing the fog-bound street, painting luminous halos around the silhouettes of 20-plus biters staggering over fallen timbers. Bruce unleashes a barrage of armor-piercing rounds at the onslaught. He gets most of them, the casings flinging one by one up into the air, a row of reanimated corpses doing involuntary jigs in the swirling spray of fluids, ragged bodies collapsing in a synchronized line dance of death. But Bruce doesn't notice Gabe fanning out to the right, going over an errant biter who is dragging toward an alley. If the dead infiltrate the shadowy nooks and crannies of the town before they are all dispatched, there will be hell to pay. In all the commotion, the guards returning with heavy artillery, the shouts, the sweeping beams of arc light, the 2 machine gun placements starting to spit fire, Gabe gets separated. He follows a biter into a dark alley and immediately loses track of the thing. Fuck! Gabe hisses loudly, spinning around, scanning the darkness, his rifle raised and ready, the shadows engulfing him. He can hardly see his hand in front of his face. He has 2 extra magazines and sheaths on his belt, a Glock tucked against his left pant leg, and a Randall knife thrust down the inside of his right boot. He's loaded for bear, but right now he can't see shit. He smells the thing, that rancid meat and toe cheese odor infecting the dark. He hears a crunch and jerks the muzzle toward the sound. Nothing. He moves deeper into the alley, the sounds of pandemonium out on the street fading in his ringing ears. His heart bangs in his chest. His mouth goes dry. He swings the gun's barrel to the right, blinks away the sweat dripping in his eyes, and then swings the muzzle to the left. Where the fuck did that shitbird go? He plunges deeper into the passageway. The darkness thickens. A sudden noise to his immediate right straightens his spine, the clatter of a tin can rolling across pavement, and he pulls the trigger. Half a dozen high-velocity slugs trace through the dark like Roman candles, ricocheting off the adjacent brick in a necklace of dust puffs. Gabe stops and listens, the blasts echoing in his ears. Nothing moves. Nothing makes a sound. Maybe he has the wrong alley. He could have sworn the thing lumbered into this one, but the darkness works on Gabe now, steals his confidence, sends tremors of panic down his bones. What the fuck? He approaches the end of the alley, a dead end crowded with garbage dumpsters and strewn with trash. He reaches for a Zippo with his free hand, his other hand propping the rifle on his ample hip. He can hear the low putter of a generator nearby, probably inside the wall, as he pulls the lighter out and thumbs the little flywheel, sparking a minuscule yellow flame. The flickering cone of light illuminates a huge figure with milk glass eyes and a tattered burial coat standing 3 feet away. Gabe lets out a yelp and drops the lighter, jerking back and fumbling for the trigger as the biter lunges at him, chewing at the air. Gabe loses his balance. He falls on his ass hard, hitting the pavement with a grunt. The biter pounces, this one hungry and twitchy and full of fight. And Gabe flails impotently at the thing with the short barrel of the rifle, unable to get a good shot. The gun discharges once, the muzzle flash capturing a snapshot of the monster going for Gabe's throat with green, mossy incisors. Gabe manages to dodge the snapping teeth, but loses his grip on the gun in the process, the MiG clattering to the pavement beside him. He squirms and writhes and lets out a throttled cry of rage and finally gets his hand around the grip of the Randall knife in his boot. With one violent jerk, he thrusts the blade up at the biter's head. At first, the knife merely lands a glancing blow to the monster's jaw, ripping open a flap of mortified flesh. Gabe's eyes have adjusted to the dark enough now to see shapes, wet, fleshy blurs, and he slashes madly at the top of the creature until the knife impales the monster through the left nostril. The point penetrates the nasal cavity, and the rotten skull fissures down the middle with the adrenaline-fueled force of Gabe's stabbing blow. The biter gushes fluids all over him as the cranium splits in half. Gabe gasps and rolls away, the dead thing deflating and going still in a puddle of its own fluids, which spreads on the paving stones like black oil. Gabe manages to roll toward his rifle. But before he can get to the gun, his heart racing now, his adrenaline sparking in his eyes like sunspots, he senses a change in the alley behind him. Movement as black as bat wings floods his peripheral vision as the noise of inhuman growling, a chorus of guttural rusty gears grinding, rumbles slowly toward him. He smells the telltale stench of rancid proteins and black rot flooding the alley. Dizziness courses over him as he rises up on shaky legs and slowly turns. His eyes suddenly dilate, an involuntary shudder traveling down his spine as he takes in the horror. At least 10 biters, maybe more, shuffle toward him with implacable dead stares. An entire pack blotting out any hope of escape. An insatiable regiment of monsters moving as one, closing in on him, silhouetted like deadly marionettes by the light spilling across the mouth of the alley behind him. Gabe lets out another garbled, defiant scream and darts toward his gun. It's too late. Before he can scoop the weapon up, the lead walker goes for his beefy shoulder. He kicks at its midsection with his jackboot, reaching for his Glock, when another monster moves in from his other flank, clawing at his neck. Gabe puts his head down and raises the pistol and tries to steamroll his way through the center of the pack, firing wildly, the muzzle barking and flashing with the surreal, intermittent flicker of a Nickelodeon. There's too many of them. Dead arms reach for him before he clears the jumble, cold fingers curled into grappling hooks, latching onto him, driving him to the pavement. He lands on the stones, wrenching his back, gasping for breath, his clip already empty, the air knocked out of his lungs. He tries to roll away, but the creatures descend on him, a pack of wolves going for his jugular, and he ends up on his back, wedged against the wall, trapped, staring at the inscrutable starry night sky looking down at him with impassive silence. He can't breathe. He can't move. The shock sets in, seizing up his stocky limbs, and he realizes with an odd measure of chagrin that this is it. This is all she wrote. Fuck! The monsters converge on him. They hover over him, their putrid maws dripping the drool of bloodlust, their eyes as shiny as buffalo nickels. Everything slows down, as if Gabe is dreaming, as they close in for the feeding. The end. The end. He always wondered if the end would be like they say it is in the movies. Your life passing before you, or some bullshit woo-woo thing like that. But it isn't. Gabriel Harris learns in that horrible moment before the first set of rotten teeth clamp down on him that the end doesn't come in gossamer wings and angelic visions. It comes in a loud pop, like a balloon exploding, and a final image steeped in wish fulfillment. He sees the closest walker whiplash suddenly in a gruesome eruption of tissue and blood, its head coming apart at the seams and raining blood on him in a slow-motion ritual baptism. He stares as the popping sounds continue, the dry, muffled snapping noises recalling a string of wet firecrackers, and more heads erupt. The monsters collapse around him in a gruesome sequential massacre. He comes back to his senses in time to see his savior out of the corner of his eye. She stands silhouetted in the center of the alley, 30 feet away, a matching .22 caliber Ruger rimfire pistol blazing in each hand, the muzzle silenced by noise suppressors. The last biter goes down, and the dry clapping noises cease as quickly as they started. The woman with the guns lets up on the triggers. Without any emotion or ceremony, she thumbs the magazine release on one gun, then the other, the empty mags dropping to the pavement with a clatter. The guns lower, dangling at her side now, as she scans the scene with the casual authority of a surveyor taking the measure of a building site. Gabe tries to sit up, but his back complains, the nerves pinched, his sacrum sprained. "Holy fucking shit," he mutters, kicking away a wet corpse that had fallen on his legs. He rises to a sitting position and cringes at the pain. Lily walks up to him. "You okay? Did you get nipped? Did they break the skin?" Gabe takes in a series of deep breaths, glancing around the alley at the carnage. The dozen or so biters now lie in contorted bundles of morbid flesh across the width of the alley, their heads blossoming with the red jelly of breached brain matter, the paving stones around them running red with their diseased blood. No, Gabe stammers, trying to get his bearings. "I'm good." At the mouth of the alley, an arc light sweeps across the gap and penetrates the darkness. Lily kneels by Gabe and she shoves her pistols down the back of her jeans. The light puts a silver halo around her head, highlighting wisps of her chestnut-brown hair. "Let me give you a hand," she says and helps him to his feet. Gabe groans slightly as he levers his bullish body to its full height. "Where's my gun?" "We'll get it," she says. Gabe stretches his sore neck. "That was about as close as I ever want to come." "I hear ya." She glances over her shoulder. The sounds of voices raised over the din of gunfire begin to fade. Lily lets out a breath. "There's no excuse for this," she says. "We need all hands on deck from now on." "Copy that," Gabe says. "Come on, let's get you checked out and clean up this fucking mess." She starts toward the mouth of the alley when he grabs her and gently stops her. "Lily! Wait," he says and licks his lips. He's not good with words, but he needs to say something to her. He looks into her eyes. "Thanks for... I'm just saying I appreciate it." She shrugs and gives him a smirk. "I need you in one piece." He starts to say something else when he notices Lily suddenly flinching, doubling over slightly. She holds her tummy. "You okay?" "Yeah, just a little cramp." She breathes through her mouth, blowing breaths over her lips for a moment. "Girl stuff. Don't worry about it." The pain passes. "Come on, let's go kick some ass." She turns and walks away, stepping over the corpses of the dead. That night, Lily and her inner circle stay up late, working behind the scenes to shore up the town's defenses. Bruce marshals every last able-bodied man on Martinez's crew to reinforce the barricades. They repair the north wall, strengthening the ramparts with extra sheet metal and timbers, and they move more trailers across the weak spots. They keep a close watch on the surrounding wetlands. All the noise and confusion of the Walker attack has stirred more of the dead out of the adjacent woods. Gabe supervises a rotating shift of gunners positioned at the .50 caliber perches off each corner of the wall. Well into the wee hours, the armor-piercing rounds crackle and flare at regular intervals, picking off stragglers shambling out of the trees in groups of 2 or 3, and sometimes as many as 9 or 10 clumped together in ragged phalanxes. Nobody really notices the fact that the behavior of the dead is changing, their number growing, their movements becoming agitated like schools of fish reacting to vibrations in a vast fishbowl. Nobody pays much attention to the growing threat of herds forming. Everybody is too busy worrying about an assault from the living. Second-guessing the intentions of these violent strangers becomes an almost obsessive-compulsive activity for Lily and her comrades that night. They talk about it under their breaths as they work on the wall. They discuss it in secret in dark back rooms. They agonize over it silently to themselves as they perform their individual tasks, taking inventory of their arsenal of firearms and ammunition, making plans for another run to the National Guard station, formulating countermeasures in the event of a raid, laying traps, constructing escape routes, and generally preparing for the worst. Lily believes they could be attacked at any moment. Since becoming pregnant, she has been vacillating between debilitating fatigue and manic bursts of energy, but now she has little time for food, rest, even a break, despite Austin's entreaties to take it easy for the sake of the baby. Maybe it's the rush of hormones from the early stages of her first trimester. Senses are heightened during this phase, blood flow increases, brain activity sharpens. Lily channels this surge of energy into a whirlwind of activity. Austin has to pound Red Bull and power bars just to keep up with her, following her around like some harried government attaché, and she rises to the occasion with relentless attention to detail. Nobody says it aloud, but Lily has almost imperceptibly slipped into the role of surrogate leader. Austin fears that it's too much for a woman in her condition to be taking on such responsibility. But for Lily it cuts the other way. She's taking all these risks because she's pregnant, not just in spite of it. She's not only fighting for her own life, not to mention the future of the town, but she's also fighting for the life of her unborn child. She will do what has to be done until the governor is back in action. On a deeper level, she's learning what Woodbury means to her. She almost feels as though she understands the governor on a more fundamental level now. She would kill for this town. With the dawning of the next morning, Austin finally talks her into having something to eat. He makes her ramen noodles on the sterno pot, and then convinces her she should get off her feet for a few hours. Gabe offers to take over supervisory duties while she rests, and the town goes about its business of surviving another day. The rumor mill quiets down, for the time being at least, thanks to Barbara and David Stern, who assured the townspeople that the governor is safe and sending regular dispatches from the hinterlands. No, he hasn't found the escapees yet, and no, there's no immediate danger. And yes, everybody should just stay calm and tend to their families and not worry, and take comfort in knowing the town is safe and in good hands and blah blah blah. Of course, during this strange limbo, which continues for days, nobody suspects what's in store for Woodbury, least of all Lily. Despite her relentless attention to stepping up their defenses and planning for every imaginable contingency, she would never dream in her wildest nightmares what is on the horizon.
"Let's take a gander at that throat,"
Bob Stuckey says with a wink to a little boy sitting on a peach crate in a cluttered studio apartment. The child, a freckled, cherubic 8-year-old in a faded SpongeBob t-shirt with a cowlick of black hair, says, "Ah," as Bob gently inserts a tongue depressor into the boy's mouth. The place smells of liniment and sweat and coffee grounds. Packing blankets drape the windows, and a ratty old sleeper couch in the corner has yellowed sheets on it. The woman of the house, the plump, olive-skinned matron who stopped Dr. Stevens during the escape, hovers over Bob and the child, wringing her hands nervously.
"You see how red it is, Bob?" "Little sore, is it, sport?"
Bob says to the boy, pulling the depressor free. The boy nods sheepishly. Bob reaches down to a medical bag and rifles through the contents.
"Gonna fix you right up, little man."
He pulls a small vial out of the bag.
"Have you screaming at your sister again in no time."
The mother gives the medicine a skeptical look.
"What is it?"
Bob hands the pill bottle to the woman.
"Mild antibiotic. I'm thinking we got a little bug going around. Nothing to worry about. Give him one of these 3 times a day with food, fix him right up."
The woman chews her lip. Bob cocks his head at her.
"There a problem?"
The woman shrugs.
"I got nothing to trade, Bob. I can pay you back in food or something."
Bob smiles, closing the bag with a snap.
"There's no call for that, Mary Ann."
She looks at him.
"Oh. Bob, you sure? This is Woodbury."
He winks at her.
"We're all family here."
Marianne Dolan once stopped traffic with her olive-skinned French-Canadian beauty, her hourglass figure and enormous blue-green eyes. A decade and a half of hard housework and single parenting took its toll on her looks, and the plague times deepened the lines around her mouth and eyes. But now, as she breaks out in a guileless, warm smile, the splendor of her once lovely face returns.
"I really, really appreciate it, Bob. You're
A loud knocking on the door interrupts her. Marianne blinks with a start, and Bob glances toward the door. Marianne turns and calls out, "Who is it, please?" From the other side of the door, the sound of a clear, forceful, feminine voice rings out.
"It's Lily Call, Marianne. Sorry to bother you."
Marianne Dolan goes across the room.
"Lily?"
she says after opening the door and finding Lily standing alone in the corridor.
"What can I do for you?"
"I understand Bob's here," Lily says. She wears her trademark ripped denim and baggy cable knit, her hair in mussy tendrils, a web belt loaded with mag pouches around her waist. Something about her complexion, the way she's carrying herself, speaks of vigor, sturdiness, strength, the likes of which Marianne hasn't seen in this woman before. The web belt is not a fashion statement.
He certainly is, Marianne says with a grin. He's helping Timmy, in fact. Come in.
Bob stands as the two women approach.
Well, well, looks like the cavalry's here. How you doing, Lily girl?
Lily looks impressed.
Look at you, Bob. Making house calls now.
Bob smiles and gives her a shrug.
It's nothing. Just trying to do my part.
The look on Bob's weathered face, now alert and clear-eyed, says it all. His pouchy eyes glitter with pride, his dark hair neatly combed back. He is a new man, and it delights Lily. She turns to Marianne.
You mind if I borrow the good doctor for a minute? Austin woke up a little under the weather today. Not a problem,
Marianne says, and then turning to Bob she adds,
I can't thank you enough, Bob.
She looks at her son.
What do you say, Timmy? Thanks?
The little boy mutters, gazing up at his mom and the other adults. Bob pats the child's head.
Don't mention it, sport. Hang in there.
Lily leads Bob out the door, down the corridor, and out the exit.
What's the problem with Pretty Boy?
Bob asks as they stroll down the brick path in front of the Dolan's building. The sun is high and bright in the cloudless sky, the heat pressing down on them. The Georgia summer isn't far off. The vaguest hints of asphalt baking and miserable muggy days on the breeze.
Austin's fine,
Lily tells him, leading him into a little alcove of poplar trees for some privacy.
I didn't want to ask you about the governor in front of Marianne.
Bob nods and gazes across the street at a row of storefronts where some kids are playing kickball.
He's okay, far as I can tell. Still in a coma, but his breathing seems normal. Color's good, pulse is strong. I think he's gonna make it, Lily.
She nods and lets out a sigh. She gazes into the distance, thinking.
I've done everything I can think of to keep us safe while he's out. You done good, Lily. We're gonna be fine. Thanks to you taking the ball. I just wish he would wake up.
She thinks about it some more.
I don't want people getting nervous, panicking. They're already wondering why he would be out on the search for so long. Don't you worry, he'll come back to us. He's as strong as a bull.
Lily wonders if Bob really believes this. The seriousness and duration of the induced coma, Bob's best guess is that it was brought on by a combination of hypovolemic shock and all the painkillers and anesthetic administered to the man during the rough patch immediately after the attack, is impossible to predict. As far as Lily can tell, the man could wake up any day now, or remain a vegetable for the rest of his life. Nobody has any experience with such things, and the uncertainty is driving Lily crazy. She starts to say something else, when she notices the sound of heavy footsteps on the wind. Somebody trotting swiftly down an adjacent sidewalk, the noise interrupting her thoughts. She glances over her shoulder and sees Gus trundling quickly toward them. Built like a fire plug, the little man looks like he just got served with a subpoena, his bulldog features filled with urgency.
Lily,
he says breathlessly as he waddles up to them.
Been looking all over for you.
Take a breath, Gus. What's the matter? The man pauses, leaning over with his hands on his knees, catching his breath.
They want to use up the rest of that gas we got stored in the warehouse.
Who does?
Curtis, Rudy, and them other guards.
He looks at Lily.
Say they need it for the rigs at the wall. What do you think? That's the last of the fuel. That's all we got left.
Lily sighs. In the governor's absence, more and more of the townspeople have been coming to her for advice, for decisions, for guidance, and she's not sure she wants to be the one giving it. But somebody has to. At last she says,
It's all right, Gus. Let him take it. We'll go on another run tomorrow.
Gus nods. Bob looks at her for a moment, a strange expression crossing his deeply wrinkled features, a mixture of fascination, concern, and something unreadable, as though he knows something is different about her. Gasoline has become the lifeblood of Woodbury, not only an energy source, but also a sort of morbid gauge of their odds of survival. Nobody fucks around with the rationing of fuel. Lily looks at Bob.
It'll be okay. We'll find some more tomorrow.
Bob gives her a tepid nod, as though he knows she doesn't really believe anything she's saying. Over the course of the next 3 days, they do find more fuel. Lily sends a small contingent of guards, Gus, Curtis, Rudy, Matthew, and Ray Hilliard, out in one of the military cargo trucks. Their mission? To scour the auto centers at the ransacked Walmart and the 2 Piggly Wigglies on this side of the county line. They hope to find one of the underground holding tanks still containing a few gallons of residue. Plan B is to siphon as much as possible from any stray wreck or abandoned car that hasn't been stripped to the bone by looters or 2 years of hard Georgia weather. By the time the men return on Wednesday evening, they are exhausted but successful, having stumbled upon an abandoned KOA campground in Forsyth, 40 miles to the east. The garage out behind the clubhouse, padlocked since the advent of the turn, held a couple of rusted-out golf carts and a huge holding tank half full of the sweet, unleaded nectar of the gods, nearly 150 gallons of the stuff, and Lily is delighted with the windfall. If folks are frugal with it and ration it wisely, the fuel will provide Woodbury with another month or so of power. For the rest of that week, Lily keeps a lid on things as best she can, oblivious to the fact that events are about to spiral out of control. Chapter 5. On Friday night, a night Lily and her inner circle will later mark as a significant turning point, a warm front rolls in from the south, turning the air as muggy as a greenhouse. By midnight, the town has settled down and fallen silent, most of its inhabitants slumbering on sweat-damp sheets, a regiment of guards quietly keeping watch on the walls. Even Bob Stuckey has taken a break from his round-the-clock vigil with the governor, and now sleeps soundly on a cot in one of the adjacent service bays under the racetrack. Only the infirmary, still blazing with the harsh halogen light of an operating room, buzzes with the muffled clamor of angry voices.
"I'm sick of it,"
Bruce Cooper complains, pacing in front of the broken-down monitors and gurneys shoved up against the back wall of the medical bay.
"Who made her queen bitch? Bossing people around like fucking Cleopatra."
"Settle down, Brucey," Gabe mutters from his chair angle next to the governor's bed. The wounded man lying as still and pale as a mannequin under the sheets. It's been a week since the governor tangled with the girl in the dreadlocks, and over the course of those 7 days, Philip Blake has remained mostly unconscious. Nobody is comfortable with calling it a coma, although Bob has labeled it as such. But whatever grips the man seems to have its hooks deep within him. Only on 2 occasions has Philip stirred ever so slightly, his head lolling suddenly and a few garbled syllables coughing out of him. But each time he sank back into his twilight world just as abruptly as he came out of it. Nevertheless, Bob thinks this is a good sign. The governor's color continues to improve with each passing day, and his breathing continues to clear and strengthen. Bob has started increasing the amount of glucose and electrolytes in the IV and keeping closer track of the man's temperature. The governor has been at 98.6 for over 2 days now.
"What's your problem with her anyway?"
Gabe asks the black man.
"She never did anything to you. What's your beef with her?"
Bruce pauses, thrusting his big hands into the pockets of his camo pants, letting out an angry breath.
"All I'm saying is nobody made it official that she should be the one in charge right now."
Gabe shakes his head.
"Who gives a shit? She wants to be temporary honcho. Let her be temporary honcho. Some stupid bitch from some fucking gated community?"
Bruce snaps at him.
"She's a lightweight."
Gabe levers himself out of his chair, his back still a little stiff from the debacle in the alley a few days ago. He balls his fists as he comes around the governor's gurney and stands toe-to-toe with Bruce.
"Okay, let's get something straight. That lightweight bitch you're talking about? She saved my fucking ass the other night. That lightweight bitch has more cojones than 90% of the men we got living in this place. So what? So fucking what? Bruce stands his ground, glaring at Gabe with eyes blazing. She can aim a gun, pull a trigger, big fucking deal. Gabe shakes his head. What the fuck is your deal, man? You get up on the wrong side of bed today? I'm out of here. Bruce storms toward the door, shaking his head, disgusted, mumbling obscenities under his breath. He makes his exit in a huff, slamming the metal door with a bang that reverberates through the tiled chamber. Staring at the door, Gabe stands there for a moment, nonplussed by it all, when he hears a sound coming from across the room that stiffens his spine. It sounds like a voice coming from the man lying on the gurney. At first, Gabe thinks he's hearing things. Looking back on it, he will come to the conclusion that he did indeed hear the governor's voice at that moment, right after that door had slammed, the words enunciated so clearly and spoken with such clarity that Gabe initially figured he was imagining the sound of the voice saying something like, "How long?" Gabe whirls toward the gurney. The man on the bed hasn't moved. His bandaged face still elevated slightly on its pillow, the head of the gurney at a 45-degree angle. Gabe slowly approaches. "Governor?" The man on the bed remains still, but suddenly, almost in answer to Gabe's voice, the single eye, which is still visible on that face, peering through a hatchwork of thick white gauze bandages, begins to blink open. It happens in stages. Feebly at first, but fluttering more and more vigorously until that single eye is wide open and staring at the ceiling. Another few blinks and the eye begins to focus on things in the room. The pupil dilates slightly as Gabe approaches. Pulling the folding chair next to the bed, sitting down and putting a hand on the governor's cold, pale arm, Gabe fixes his gaze on that single searching eye. His heart races. He stares into that eye with such feverish intensity that he can almost see his own face reflected in the teary orb of the eyeball. "Governor, can you hear me?" The man on the gurney manages to loll his head slightly toward Gabe, and then fixes his one good eye on the stocky, crew-cut head looming over the bed. Over dry, caked, chapped lips, the man utters again, "How long?" At first, Gabe is thunderstruck and can't even form a response. He just stares at that haggard, bandaged face for one endless, excruciating moment. Then he shakes off his daze and says very softly, "Were you out?" A very slow, very weak nod. Gabe licks his lips, not even aware that he's grinning with giddy excitement. "Almost a week." He swallows back his urge to cry out with glee and hug the man. He wonders if he should get Bob in here. Even though this man is probably a few years his junior, this is his boss, his mentor, his compass, his father figure. "You were awake a bit here and there," Gabe says as calmly as he can manage. "But I don't think you'll remember anything." The governor turns his head slowly from side to side, as if testing the limits of his condition. At last he manages another hoarse sentence. "Did you find Doc Stevens?" He takes